All right, we are live. Okay, let's go for it. All right, so I guess the nominal topic of the day is this kind of bootstrapping your own small business thing and or the general philosophy of, doing something smaller scale but sustainable and you can make a good living rather than like growth at all costs. I think this applies in academia as well as obviously in entrepreneurship. So you're the man of the hour for that.
Um, hey, first off, can you tell me how does it relate to academia?
Oh man, you're gonna like you just totally turned the tables. I want to speak for an hour. No, I think that okay, I'll give you a super quick
Yeah.
one. The super quick one is that like, you know, you could imagine. I mean, the nice thing about academia is that if you could, if you want to have a giant, really prolific lab, I mean, in many fields, you can just raise a lot of money, right? You can just get a lot of grants. I mean, the sky is really the limit, right? I mean, if you're really good at getting grants and having collaborators and working on big projects, you can just get like a ton of money and build up a giant lab and have a lot of students, have postdocs, have staff. And then, if you get more and more money, the university gives you benefits where you get better office space, you get, a wing of a building, you might get like all this stuff and you're running like this empire. I mean, some of these professors in, especially in these big engineering fields, like they have like giant labs and they have like, an entire wing of a building and they're like on top of an empire. The biggest case of this is a bit extreme. It's like I think Eric Lander, who was the director of the Broad Institute, he was a really famous biologist. Like, I mean, I'm sure he's fully a director now, but when he was running his research lab, I think at MIT, they had these lab web pages that got more and more ridiculous. Like they have annual pictures of the lab, and it just got bigger and bigger and bigger until it was like literally 100+ people in his lab. And like the lab webpage, like the staff was like, you just keep scrolling, like how many students there, how many staff scientists, how many postdocs, and like one like PI. All right. So you can do that. Or, I think the approach that I take and many people take is just stay lean. And, you get grants whenever we need for projects, but just kind of doing that lean sort of thing of, doing enough research that is, satisfactory for your level of comfort and making an impact that way and having a more sustainable path. And of course, with that path you're not going to get the giant building and the institute named after you, but you can still have a very successful and sustainable career that way. So that was what resonated with me about that.
I see. Yeah, I had no idea that you could get so big, but I guess
You can get big. I mean, it's money, right? I mean, like grant money is money, right? So, I think at universities, money speaks, right? That like, it's kind of like when you become a faculty or a PI level research staff, you basically have, being a principal investigator means that you have an account to write. You're literally a principal investigator, which means that you are a person who can write research grants to get money from the government to start research projects. And you have the permission to do that with the infrastructure support of your school. So then, if you can just write a bazillion grants and get bazillions of dollars in money, I mean, the school is not going to be like, whoa, you can't do that, right? They're like, welcome, bring more in, right? Because the school gets some of that money, they get more prestige, they get more, it's just like, welcome in, right? So like the sky's the limit, but obviously most people just kind of do what they need to do to kind of sustain a program of the size. And it depends on fields too, right? I mean, if you're in pure math, you're probably not doing a lot of grant stuff, but if you're in like bioengineering or something, you probably need a lot more money to run a lab. So it depends on the field you choose and the kind of research you do too.
Pretty cool, dude. So I could tell my story, or should I just ramble, and then you could cut me off if I'm.
Yeah, you can just ramble. Yeah, just go for it.
So
the day you're born.
No. So this company that I'm doing, Math Papa, like it started 2013, like the very first line of code, 2013, and like back then, I didn't really know, or I was attracted to the idea of building something from the ground up, but I didn't have a strong enough or a clear enough vision where I felt comfortable recruiting anyone else. Like I have these vague ideas is like the worst pitch possible in terms of trying to get someone to commit, like a year of their career to join in. So I was just like, okay, I don't quite know what I want to do, and maybe my skills aren't quite up to par where I could, hit the ground running. But what I want to do is just play around with some of these ideas so they become more concrete, and then hopefully I could get a better idea of what I actually want to do. Um,
Right. You
but
couldn't do that with a full-time job. Just the mental bandwidth, I guess.
yeah, I guess yeah. There's another route to starting a business would be to get a full-time job and then to kind of moonlight, just slowly build up this code base until it turns into something that makes enough money that you could quit your job. But technically, I don't know. Like, isn't that route? I know it's very popular, but like, isn't it against the
Yeah, I mean,
employment?
yeah, exactly. So that you just don't want to. So you just don't want to deal with that possibility.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah. So, and part of it also was that if I had a full time job, I I didn't think I could actually get something off the ground. I think that was my biggest fear. Um, so yeah, so those early days, it was just me with my laptop at a coffee shop like Red Rock.
And this was right after you finished your PhD, right? Like the context was, thinking about even going back, you're ending your PhD and you were ramping up for that life, right?
Yeah. And so my mentality was that I've always enjoyed the idea of building a company. And if I didn't do it immediately after school, the fear was I would get too comfortable and I would never give it a try. And so that was my thinking going into it, that like I want to do it, like that I'm not tied down to anything right now. So let me just kind of force myself to try to get something off the ground and see what happens. And my initial ideas were due to, I guess, two experiences. One, while I was a grad student in computer science, I tutored at a local middle school. This was purely on a volunteer basis. And I was always attracted to this idea of how technology could help students learn who didn't have access to like a human tutor, or a teacher who had enough time to help them with whatever they were stuck with. Because the reality in a classroom, if it's the ratio is 30-1, if you're stuck on something, like, I guess if you're super proactive, you could ask the teacher for help anytime you're stuck. But most of the time, you don't really get the material, and you show up to class and you don't ask questions, and you fall behind, and then math builds upon itself. So you never understand what you're supposed to have in the previous year, and then like every successive level, it just makes less and less sense until at some point
Right. Right.
you,
So,
you
why did you do the original tutoring thing in grad school? So what was on your mind for that? Like how much of this setup was there, or was it just exploration?
I mean, I think just from an intellectual standpoint, I think nerds, they have this idea that like, oh, education, we could fix education if we just did these two, very simple sounding ideas. And in the back of my head, I was always like, I'm probably missing something because it can't be this easy, right? So I was interested enough in this idea of like, oh, why do kids struggle to learn math? Um, I I thought it was interesting enough to me where it was worth my time to volunteer, get some hands-on experience, and really see for kids who are struggling exactly what they're struggling with. Um, and so I did that. I volunteered at this. It's called Homework Club at the local middle school in Palo Alto, and I mean it's not really a club. It's for, I mean, kids. They're assigned to this extra class because in the previous year, the math teacher thought that they could use some extra time to improve their math skills. Like maybe they were a little behind, and if you had an extra, the theory is if you had an extra 45 minutes a day, you could catch up to your grade level, and then from then on, you'd be in good shape. Which it sounds pretty good, but there are a lot of challenges to get that to work.
So was
Like
this the first time they were experimenting with this thing,
no, no,
or they've already had it for a while?
I don't know exactly how long it's been around, but my impression it's been around for at least a few years before uh, I I started working with the group. And then my experience with there it was so much it was so much it was such a good experience for me to interact with these students. just on a personal level. Um, and I wish I could have done more in terms of the math, but like the reality is it's very difficult. Um, it's a tough problem. I mean, the class is small. They're only like 8 kids or 9 kids in this classroom, but um, it's I can make progress with the student one on one, but in like a lecture setting, like people are at slightly different levels, and it's really tough to make it a productive 45 minutes for every single student.
So even with 8 people, even
Even
eight
with
on
eight
one was
people,
really
yeah,
hard. Yeah,
that's right,
yeah.
that's right. And then so this was Khan Academy was around by then, and the school had some extra laptops, or they had a classroom set of laptops. So the standard technique was to use worksheets. But I thought, like, have we experimented with Khan Academy yet? Like, maybe this could help. Um, and to a certain extent, it helps, but it's it takes skill to implement successfully because there are a few issues, like kids don't stay on task, or they'll be focused too much on like the easier things so that they could accumulate points. Um, so yeah, stuff like that. And then, they don't have to do Khan Academy, right? Like it's a laptop. You can do whatever you want. And
Yeah.
like discipline became an issue too. And so at some point we reverted back to the worksheets because we couldn't get the laptop set. We couldn't get the technology to actually be a net positive for the classroom experience.
Right.
Um, and so, like I was attracted to the idea of technology being used to help kids who didn't have access to enough human attention, but like using existing tools, I couldn't figure out how to get it to work. But I felt like that something could be done to improve the situation. That was kind of my intuition. Um, so that was one experience that got me interested in blending tech and education. And then the second one was when I was working on the precursor to Coursera. So at Stanford, when the MOOCs were a big rage, at Stanford there were.
A bigger rage. Never heard about that. That's a good word. Rage.
I mean, the hype was tremendous, in terms of like, okay, these MOOCs are happening in 5 years. Will there be universities outside of the top 40? Right? Like that was the mentality that like, okay, maybe Stanford and Harvard will still exist, but outside of the elite institutions, maybe everyone's going to learn online. Like, that was at least a possibility back then. And so, yeah, at Stanford, the first 2 courses that were taught on this platform were databases, taught by my advisor, Jennifer Whittam, and then the machine learning one taught by Andrew Ng. And so I had heard that my advisor was going to be working on these courses. And then I just said, hey, look, this is pretty interesting to me. Can I chip in and help out just so I could, get
So
a
this
better.
is 2011,
I
summer
think
of
so.
2011.
I
Yeah,
think
I
so.
guess by
Yeah.
2012 I had already graduated and the MOOCs had already launched. So December 2011. When was the tutoring thing again?
Uh, Earlier than that, I think.
Like
I might be
2010
getting it
maybe?
twisted, but roughly the same time.
Around 2010, 2011. Okay,
Yeah,
so
yeah, yeah.
incubating 2010, 2011. And the first line of code Math Papa was until 2013. All right, so
Yeah,
back to
yeah.
the Coursera. Yeah.
Yeah. So then I helped out with building the database exercises for that course. I mean, basically, in the course you have a database, and then the student is supposed to write a query that does whatever the question asks them to do. And then in order to check whether that's right or not, we check on like a hidden copy of the database, right? The theory being if you actually wrote the correct query, then your answer should match, the query result should match our query result, even if your query word for word doesn't match, the query and the answer key. So yeah, that was the software I wrote, and it was, yeah, that was 2011, and then 2012 was my last year. Then 2013, I was just like, let me try to get an education website off the ground. That was basically my mentality. And then so my first lines of code were trying to build this interactive tool that could, I guess the theory was students who are struggling with math could use this tool to kind of intuit for themselves why you know, why certain concepts were true. So if you're trying to learn how to solve algebraic equations, it'll create some tool that would help you, I guess, figure out for yourself essentially how to solve equations.
So what was the
But the
first,
real
sorry, before you say the
yeah,
reality, what was the first motivating example you had in your head? Like to, what were the first kinds of examples you wanted this tool to do concretely?
yeah. So an example would be like, okay, if you want to solve 4x plus 2 equals 2x plus 5, you could type that in, and then automatically there'd be a slider for x, right? And then you could kind of play with the slider, then see, okay, the left side for a certain value of x, the left side would be equal to something, and then the right side would be equal to something. And then so that way there's some like ground truth. I guess my big thing with first year math, students learning math, is that they'll mechanically solve an equation, but they don't have a sense as to, there's no, they don't have a deeper feeling for like what the question is asking, right? It's just like,
Right.
here's a string of symbols. Let me do some mechanical thing to get the string of symbols that they're looking for.
Oh,
Right.
right. So the first one's actually an exploration tool. I mean, it was kind of like
Yeah.
Brett Victor had his thing then, the Dragon Box folks. So they had these kind of explorable math things where you have sliders and trying to build into it. So it was more of a trying to build intuitions about these equations sort of thing.
That's right. That's right. And I guess it didn't really, it wasn't that big of a success, meaning that like we would get some visitors, but they would bounce because they'd be like, I don't get it. And then, they would leave. But the interesting thing was that, you know, when you look at the logs, so let me back up a little bit. So we had gotten, this tool sounds fairly useless, but or me, I mean, I say it's a royal we, it's me. The site actually had traffic, even though, it wasn't super useful. And the
Where do you
reason
think the traffic came from? Yeah.
yeah, so the reason why I had traffic was because I called the initial tool algebra calculator.
Algebra calculator.
This term I noticed in analytics, it had a lot of traffic, but the results weren't that good, right? Like
so it was like a low hanging fruit for
it was like a low hanging fruit, meaning that if you just put up a result that was somewhat related to what people were looking for, you would
because
get
a lot of people search for algebra calculator or something.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. So we had traffic, but then if you look at the logs,
they didn't do much, right?
Well, or they would, but they would bounce. So they would type in equations, right? Like 3x plus 5 equals 7. But we wouldn't actually solve them. We would just,
they're hoping for an answer, and then you just give them some exploratory thing.
That's right. That's right. And then they're like, oh, what the heck? This thing doesn't work. No one actually wrote in to say that, but if you look at the logs, it's fairly natural to come to that conclusion. And then I just said one day, you know what? Like I had this idea for this exploratory tool, but it doesn't look like that's what people actually want. So if people want, to learn more directly how to solve these problems, let me just build a tool that will do that.
So how long was that initial before you could launch, or when you got that initial thing working? How was that, like a few months of work? Was that a year of work? That initial exploratory thing?
Yeah, it was like half a year, maybe.
Okay, so it was significant. I mean, one person half a year. It wasn't just like I'm going to hack this up in 3 weeks. I mean, it was significant amount of work to get that up.
Yeah, I mean, I guess part of the reason, or there were a few things that happened in those 6 months. Part of it was that I wasn't super experienced in web programming, so just getting something functional. Yeah. There was a bit of a learning curve there, and then the math specific code. So to understand expressions and to take a string and to be able to parse it into something mathematical,
to kind of build up your own Mathematica Lite.
That's right. Mathematica Lite. That's the way I think about it. So I remember back then, I Google computer algebra system, just like, okay, what's the bare minimum I need to know to kind of get something working? And so that was, it took some time and some trial and error, because I had never built a parser before, like you write the grammar and all this stuff. You learn
in JavaScript too, and it's just like all like crappy JavaScript back 5 years ago too.
Yeah. That's
like without libraries for anything, right? Back then, probably.
Yeah, that's a good point. That the JavaScript back then, TypeScript was it even out? If it was out,
Yeah, and there's not good libraries. I mean, now there's libraries for everything.
yeah, yeah. Back then they had jQuery, but that's
Like it.
about it, I think. But yeah, it was tough. I mean, so one, my software engineering skill was, ramping up. And then on top of that, even for an experienced engineer, the ecosystem wasn't, super
Right, right.
friendly to building, uh, you know, big apps. Yeah, so I built this exploratory tool. It didn't work out. You look at the logs, you guess what the user intent is, and then you say, okay, like I could either stick to my vision or, just give the users what they want. And then
Mhm.
I said, give the users what they want. And then, um, and then, uh, the I forgot how quickly traffic picked up, but you could see that like,
Huh, it was
okay,
noticeable.
yeah, yeah, people were coming back, and then blogs would talk
Huh.
about you, and and so like it's like, okay, I whatever I'm doing right now is more popular than what I was doing back then.
Right. So
So
you didn't do any advertising for this. So like the blogs would actually talk about you and stuff.
yeah, yeah. Well, I think at one point early on, I experimented with some Google AdWords just to, get some people. I think that I don't know if this was necessary or not, but we paid for ads or I did, early on, for this algebra calculator,
Oh, for that
and then
word.
yeah, for that keyword, and then at some point organically we showed up on the first page,
Nice, nice.
and then once we showed up on the first page, then it's it was no longer necessary to pay for the AdWords, so I dropped it and then just relied on organic traffic looking forward.
Oh, so
um
you had no AdWords for a long time then.
yeah, yeah, so yeah, AdWords for a brief moment, and then we were on organic, and then no AdWords. That was the
Nice,
sequence.
nice.
um so yeah, it was kind of cool. Like we were making no money at the time, but the fact that from the ground up you build something and like people are showing up every day.
And that was pretty fast. I mean, that was 1 year, right? In terms of having people show up, was about 1 year.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
Yeah, yeah. So, when I look back on some of these things, there are kind of two lenses. Like one lens is, if before this whole thing started, if you say, oh, you reach this milestone, you reach this milestone, like, oh, that sounds pretty cool. But then there's the other lens where it's like, oh, if you're looking at it through the lens of, you know, super scaling startup, like
Right.
it's a different lens. And like I look at it through both because it's in the startup world, it's very tough not to look at it through the, like everyone's ambition
Because
is,
everyone's around you is that.
yeah, yeah, or they at least aspire to that, even if they haven't gotten there yet, right?
Right.
Uh, so yeah, so the first year, I guess the progress was we created something, or I did it, the site, it got traffic basically. It got regular traffic from people who were satisfied and were regular users of
And
the site.
returning and a lot of
And
returns.
returning, yeah, yeah, yeah. So that was kind of cool. So that was 2013, and then 2014, I kind of took my foot off the gas because my buddy Eldar from Jetlore, he kind of recruited me to do some data science for them.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah, that's right.
I,
You were
I
working
remember
for them. Yeah, I remember this.
you saw me on the website. And you're like, what? Did you give up? Like, what's going on?
Hey, you're like playing ping pong or whatever on the website or
So yeah,
something.
yeah, yeah, I'm on the website, but yeah. Looking back, actually, so yeah, I did a year of data science for Jetlore, and
And
looking
that was part time or
that
how?
was part time, yeah, like half time basically.
Right. And he knew you had your own thing you're working on too.
Yeah, that's right.
All right. So it was a good arrangement because like you could make some money, you can get some experience doing something else, and then you could kind of maintain your thing as well.
Yeah, yeah, because like when you go a year without making money, like it's a morale boost to make money.
Right.
So that was definitely one part of it, and then I think another big part of it was that I I learned engineering in an industrial setting for the
Mhm.
first time. So, as a PhD student, I built prototypes and so on. But when you're working in a setting where people are doing this for money and they're pros, they do
Stakes
it
are
day
real.
in day out.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It's a different. It's like a level up.
Yeah.
Well, working with engineers who, because like as a PhD student, you're like thinking about ideas, and then you have an idea, then you implement it, and then you're back to like thinking about ideas, right? So you're not quite pro level, or you don't have to
No,
be,
no,
right?
yeah,
Like,
yeah, yeah. I mean, that's not part of the job, right? Yeah.
yeah, but when you do it day in day out, it's yeah. There's a level of quality there that and a professionalism that isn't there in most grad programs. So yeah, it was. I'm I'm glad I took up my buddy's offer. And then at the end of 2014, there was kind of a big. I mean, it's all relatively speaking, but the site was listed on Reddit's front page, and like when every day I would kind of after after I go to work, I come back and then I look at the Google Analytics. And then one day it just blew up. I'm just like, well, what happened? Like the visitors on the site, it's like 4 digits. I never see 4 digits like in the real
Like
time feed.
simultaneous,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
concurrent. Yeah, that's huge.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Just like, what is going on? Like, is it broken or what? And then, I forgot how long it took me to find out what was. Oh, no, no, no. Yeah, the referrals. Yeah, it's pretty obvious. Yeah, the referrals. You kind of see Reddit.com. Like, oh, so I go to Reddit, and then we're like on the bottom of the front page. It's like, oh, that's kind of cool. Um, and then once Reddit talks about you, then like everyone talks about you. Well, not everyone, but like you get listed by Product Hunt, Lifehacker. So like, I guess those sites like Lifehacker, they probably just someone's just looking at the Reddit front
Yeah, so there
page.
was a bump. There was a bump for that. And how long was that bump lasting? And did that sustain?
So the bump only lasted like a few days, but
Yeah.
I think there's a longer term thing where your page rank goes up because all these links are high quality links are pointing to you. Um, so I forgot exactly how the traffic looked like, but yeah, there was definitely a boost after that. Like long term boost.
So I guess the long term boost is because of the page rank and also just nice search results that if kids are searching for, because I doubt that a lot. I mean, I think a lot of the Reddit people, they just clicked on it just to play with it, but these are like adults who are in their cubicles, right? They're not kids learning math necessarily. But I think the positive benefit seems was that these other articles were written about you. So when future kids or parents search, they see more things that might go to Math Papa. It seems.
Yeah, yeah. So I think you're right. So there's a little spike, and it's like Reddit readers. They're not the users, but maybe they'll write about you or so on. And then like longer term, you get more rankings on Google, and then the people who actually want to use you on a regular basis, they start to find you. So yeah, once that, so 2014 was when I worked at Jetlore, and then 2015 I was back to full time on this thing.
So when did you decide to go back to full time after the part time?
Um, or why or when?
Yeah, why and when? I guess. Yeah, what was the
Um,
motivation for switching?
I guess even before the Reddit thing in September, there was a pretty the traffic.
Oh,
I
like the new
forgot.
school year. This is a new school year.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Like
Every new school year, there's a bump. Yeah, that's right.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And then this bump was big enough where I'm like, okay, let me give it a let me try again to kind of like push this into something that's sustainable. Cause like, it's kind of cool to get people to visit you regularly, but there's that next level you have to get to where it's actually producing income.
Actually, yeah. So by this time, did you have ads on your page, and did you have any income even through these early bumps, like
I
20?
don't think
Or,
so.
so no ads. So it was just totally clean and pure.
I think so. I think
Okay.
so. And then um you introduced me to Vic, who does
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Data Quest.
Oh man, so I get credit for all this. This is 20. This is like 2014 or so.
Yeah, yeah,
Still, yeah.
yeah. Yeah, it's tough for me to remember these dates, but yeah, you referred me to Vic, who does Data Quest.
So there's this startup that does this like online environment for learning data science. I guess this programming environment, like a Code Academy sort of thing.
Yeah.
where they just have programming problems for like Python or data type stuff. So that was a startup for that, right? And then
Yeah.
yeah.
So we were chatting, and then he referred me to his friend Justin, who does Paper Rater, which is another. Um, it's it like helps you check your grammar online.
Oh, so like a Grammarly sort of thing.
It's
Interesting.
like Grammarly, yeah.
Interesting.
And then Justin, who's super great, super helpful, he said, like, why don't you have an ad up? I'm like, oh, because
You get all this traffic, or you told him about the numbers, and he's like, "Whoa, yeah, you should put as an ad up."
yeah. And then I was like, I don't. I don't need a latte every day, you know. And then we were talking about numbers. He's like, no, it's more than a latte. Like, you know, put up an ad. And then I'm like, okay. And then I probably hesitated for a bit, and then and then I put up an ad, and like the revenue at that point, it wasn't a whole lot. But I remember like going to a museum and then walking out, and then you know looking at my phone. It's like, oh, I made $20. You know, it's
Yeah,
like
it was more than you expected. You're like, "Holy crap!" I just was sitting there. It's like,
yeah,
yeah,
more than I expected. And then so it's like, okay, um, it was like maybe back then it was like 2K a month. And like during the school year, it might make like 2K a month. I'm like, okay, 2K a month isn't that much, but you know,
it's
how
better than zero. I mean, you
yeah,
just put one ad up, right? It's way more
that's
than
right.
zero. Like
It's
all that time, you could have made 2K a month. It was zero.
well,
Right?
kind of, kind of.
Well,
I
yeah, I
mean,
grew.
not
Yeah, I grew.
2013, but
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So yeah, that's right.
Um, but yeah, and then what was I gonna say? Uh yeah, so I make like 2K a month, and then I'm just thinking, okay, how realistic is it to like triple this or, you know, 5x this? Cause then you're talking, you know, like if you're making close to a full-time salary, it's pretty cool, you know, like you can start to uh I don't know, yeah, you feel like it's sustainable at that point.
Right, right, right. I
Whereas
mean,
yeah, when you're making 2K a month, it's like that's kind of cool, but like it better grow. Otherwise, you gotta look for something else, right?
right. You don't want to do that forever. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Unless you're
Uh,
living in Thailand on the coast or whatever and freelancing. Yeah.
so yeah, at this point, I'm just like, okay, like let me let me do an inventory. Like, what is wrong with it? If I patched all this up, like how quickly would this take? And like, what's my expected result after?
So that was you were very kind of income focused at that point then because you're like we have a thing to optimize at that point. I mean,
Yeah, and maybe too much in some ways. Like, you know, when you have a scoreboard, like it's very natural to just focus on that
yeah.
scoreboard.
So
Um,
then what were the big things you did early, in that stage? So, and how did you know? I mean, how did you know whether it would increase revenue and such? So now you were in the ad stage. This is 2015 or so, I guess.
yeah.
In the ad stage.
And then so the basic idea is um like look at the logs, and then you know, like see what people are typing in, and then find the big chunks of problems. Like, well, you know, try to be efficient in terms of adding functionality that, you know, a lot of people want, but you currently don't do.
So
Like
this is logs as in what math expressions people are entering.
that's right. That's right.
And
That's
this is
right.
your own custom logging. It's not just like Google Analytics say everyone's on this part of the page. It's like your own logging.
Yeah. So we write it to a file, then I'll process the file, be like, you know, you categorize it, and then you say, okay, here are the top 5 categories that I currently don't do.
And what message do you display when you don't do it?
Sorry, I don't know how to do this problem. Something like that.
Here's an ad, sorry, I don't have this problem. Click on this ad.
No, it's but yeah, so yeah, like that was my 2015 was, you know, looking at the queries that we didn't support, and then just
That
trying to
seems pretty solid too. But that doesn't seem like you're just grubbing for money. That seems like it's like actually, you're improving the core service for and optimizing what matters because you're looking at what the most people want.
yeah. So like,
It wasn't like you're tweaking like weird layouts just to get more clicks on the ads. Right? I mean, you're actually improving the core service.
that's right, that's right. Which is kind of cool. But then at some point, so yeah, I think that maybe that whole year was pretty solid work. But then beyond that, it started to get tougher because it's just like, shoot, initially there were these huge problems that you had, right? Like pretty easy to implement things that you just didn't get around to doing yet. And then so you do it and then you get a boost, right?
Oh, so you actually see the boost, like you implement some feature and you actually do see a noticeable boost.
Um, kind of. I mean, it's not super noticeable. Like you have to segment it. So like of the users who type this
Oh,
query,
got it, got it, got it.
before then they would not return, and then after then they would return.
Mm.
But the
Right,
numbers are still small enough where if you don't segment it, it's kind of tough to see it in the overall
right,
numbers.
right. Because people are typing so many different, trying so many different things. Right,
Yeah, yeah. So then you get the low hanging fruit,
right. But then
right?
there's the diminishing returns because after a while the big categories are gone, and then you're like, ah,
That's right. And then at that point, it was I don't know. Yeah, this is the part where I kind of look back and like, maybe we could have handled it differently. But like, you know, I guess early on, like if you talk to me back in 2013, and it's like, oh, okay, now you're making whatever 10K a month, like off of ads. It's like, wow, that's great. And now, like, okay, this was a tough part, and now let's expand, right? But like, the reality was that, even if you get there, it's not obvious what to do from there in order
right,
to.
right. To do a qualitatively leap, right? Like fixing more and more bugs, there'll be diminishing returns, and implementing more and more features. It's like the same service,
That's right. That's right.
essentially. Yeah.
That's right. And then so I didn't I didn't really have a good framework for what to do from there, right? I mean, I had kind of some ideas of features that I would like to add, but like the the part that I struggled with was that they'd be features that sounded good to me, right? But
Right.
like maybe users didn't actually want it, Like it's like, oh, let's turn it into a tutor. Like maybe there should be like a dialogue thing, and
Mhm.
like not just show you the answer, but like walk you through it, and then ask you, oh, why don't you try a problem yourself to test yourself, make sure you know it, right? Um, but the downside is that most people they don't want to test
They
themselves
just want
after.
the answer. Yeah, they just want to get the answer. I mean, yeah, I mean the common use case might just be I'm struggling, so I just need to figure out the answer like now.
Yeah, so this was the tough part. I mean, my initial thinking was, let's build a tool that a lot of people use, and then let's slowly add on these educational layers. Because back when, let's go back to 2013, where I'm looking at the queries, and people are typing in equations. I'm like, okay, we'll solve it, you know, and then maybe they'll read the explanation, maybe they get it, maybe they don't. But then like my thinking was that, okay, slowly we'll add more educational material so that for the people who didn't get the automatically generated explanation but actually want to learn it, there'll be the sequence of lessons they could do so that they could get up to speed, right?
Right, right.
That was the vision. But I started building it, and like people just weren't doing it, like
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 they weren't feeling the follow up at all. They just
they
wanted the initial thing. And that was
yeah,
it.
yeah. And so there's this tension where you have this vision but users don't want it, and it's just like it's this tough question of, do users not want at all when I'm building, or like did I not build it well enough?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
and then so you could go down this rabbit hole where you always answer, oh, maybe I just didn't build it well enough,
And then you might just dig deeper in the hole to just to do it better and better, but then that gets you trapped.
Yeah, yeah. And so that was the this struggle was something, we got something, we built an initial service that people like to use, and we had a regular audience. But yeah, how do you go beyond that? And then so um I guess 2016 was a year where we tried a bunch of different things, and like nothing really quite moved the needle, I would say.
So you kind of felt like you reached a saturation kind of point. Oh, you might want to also hold the mic, more consistently because you're waving it around. You're doing the wave. That's right.
All
Just
right, I'll try to be more
you
disciplined
could
with
do a
that,
stand too. You could do the stand, but whatever. Anyways, so yeah, man, it seems like you had reached kind of a saturation point where improving the site's features wasn't gonna get the big bump that you're hoping for. That even a 2x, I guess, like forget about the 10x, right? Even that 2x, you can kind of get up there, but it seems hard to break through something. You're at some kind of sound barrier.
like a 2x is, I think, reasonable. Like a 2x, I think if we just did a better job of, I mean, so there are still kind of this long tail of things that we don't answer. I
Right,
think if we just,
but then you can't get above it. I mean, I guess okay. Let's say you 2x, but you can't 2x that, right? You feel like you can
that's right.
go
Yeah,
down
yeah, yeah. I think
after
we
we
could get,
squeeze everything out. It's like the limit goes to like 2, right? And then you're like, crap, I can't keep squeezing another doubling.
yeah, yeah. That's right. That's right. Or if you can, I mean, you physically can, but like the results to effort ratio, it
Hmm.
gets worse and worse, you know? So like
Yeah.
maybe you eventually get to 10x, but it took you
Oh,
10 years to get there, you know?
yeah,
It's like
yeah. It's like
that's
squeezing. Yeah, yeah. Well, especially, I mean, this gets back to the topic beginning of if you're a, one or two person show, that if you're very small scale, you can't scale out right at that point.
yeah, yeah. So that was part of the issue. And we're talking to people about, oh, like, what do we do in this situation? It seems like um
Like you have traction, you have money come in, you have real numbers, but are you going to try to get investors so you can grow the team, or are you going to keep going as an equal
yeah.
solo or small project?
And that was the tough thing, was that there's always this cop out that like, oh, you're not growing because you don't have a team. But like, if you want to recruit a team, then you need a vision that's big enough to support the team,
Right,
you
right.
know?
Because it's like if someone magically gave you 5 engineers right now, it's hard to imagine. Okay, let's just think of an idea that can get us 5x or something. It's like hard to think about that because it's sort of plateaued idea wise.
That's right. That's right. So like, if you got these 5 engineers and then they were just like hitting their head against the wall on this long tail of queries,
Yeah,
then
yeah. You still can't get
2x it,
that
but
much.
like that's not a win, you know? Like
Yeah.
that's not a big enough thing. Uh so yeah, that was something that, we thought about. And so I guess I guess the more time went on, the more I was open to the possibility of like, okay, maybe we just reached a local maximum, and like, this is the natural state for the project, right? Um, and you know, I guess if we want to expand it, we're still evaluating our options, I would say. Um, but if we were to expand it, we would need to find a market that's large enough to support it. So like right now, we're like this self-service site for students to learn concepts on their own. But like that market, like how many students are going to take out their credit card and like buy this thing, right?
Yeah. So
Like,
what's the model now, right? So do you have ads? You have a subscription? Yeah. What is the money making model at this point?
yeah. So right now it's ads plus, there's some daily paywall. It's 3 questions per day, and then we ask you to buy a subscription, which is $8 a month.
And that's no ads, unlimited.
Yeah, that's no ads, unlimited.
So it's 3 a day. So it's basically a preview, and then you get the thing. And I guess how much did you spend thinking about the pricing for that, or how do you prevent people from just going in their incognito tab like New York Times or whatever? How much do you think about that thing? People freeloading and also the pricing and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, we don't try super hard to, like there will always be a way around certain things, but like, uh convenience is enough for a lot of people, I would say. Because like New York Times, they still get subscriptions, right? Like, so if it became a problem, we would think harder about it. But right now we're doing okay. Um, so yeah, it's a combination of ads and premium. That's our current model. And right now the revenue from both is roughly equal.
That's pretty good. I mean, that means you balanced, kind of balance it out.
Yeah. So like, it's a decent self-sustaining thing that, continues to run. But yeah, we're considering our options. Like, it is what it is right now. And then we're keeping our eyes open to, is there something adjacent that's a bigger opportunity than what we currently have?
Yeah, well, how open would you be to, I mean, to like kind of this sort of talent acquisition, quote unquote, thing of like, I mean, it may not be truly a talent acquisition, but just like this idea that people will want to hire you or acquire you, not for the technology and not for this thing, but just because you've shown you have cred building up something for 5 years with all the graphs going up and to the right? Like you've clearly shown you have cred so that you have value to somebody else's business or someone else's initiatives and such.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't know what the market is for that, but and I don't know how appealing an acquisition would be to them, right? Because like, the asset is real, right? Like this website actually makes money. And so, if they just wanted me to work with them, or uh they wouldn't need to acquire the website as well, right? Like if it's a talent thing, then you know.
Yeah, I guess that would just be a normal hiring. I guess, yeah, I guess it's not a perfect analogy. It's not like they're buying your company just to like cancel your product and like
That's right.
have you
That's
work on
right.
something else,
Like
right?
it
Yeah.
would be a waste to acquire us if
Yeah.
they're just gonna shut down the product,
Yeah,
because
yeah, that's right. That's right.
the
Yeah,
product
because
works.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, I mean, like in terms of, you know, if at some point we conclude that this thing is what it is, then I mean, I think we would do okay on the job market. But yeah, as of now, we're evaluating like where to go
Yeah,
from
yeah.
here.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I just read this coincidentally this blog post about, there's this like every frame of painting. I don't watch this that much, but there's these like people who do film analysis on YouTube. And yeah, I haven't watched this one that much, but apparently it's reasonably popular. It has in the millions of subscribers. Let me actually look up how many subscribers they have. Let me see. Hold on. Wrong window. I just saw this blog post. I can send it over 1 second. Hold on. You can talk to fill up the time while I look it up.
Oh, what are you doing?
I'm looking up this blog post or this Every Frame of Painting YouTube channel. Okay, so the YouTube channel is I mean it's not Casey Neistat huge. It's at 1.3 million subscribers, and they've run it for whatever how many videos do they have to? I mean, it's not like Casey Neistat huge, but it's reasonable. And the thing is that all these videos just take a long, long, long time to make. And this so basically it's two people doing it. It was one guy, and then he got a kind of a partner to help him with it, but he's mainly just one guy doing it. So it's a 1/2 person show. And they just wrote a blog post about how they're not shutting it down, but they're just they're not making any more videos, right? And they made how many? I mean, they don't have that many videos. I mean, I don't know why. I don't know why I mentioned this because they're not like that popular. But they're basically saying how this guy's a film editor and that's his day job, and this other person's like they're both film people. They both have day jobs, but they just sunk like all their free time into making these videos, and they like took a lot of time for each video, and they like want to do a really good job on each, and it's kind of their craft, and it just happened to get really popular and resonate on YouTube. And then I'm sure they make money off YouTube for this. I don't think it's it's not as much money as you make because I'm not at that big of a thing, I don't think. But then they decided, we're just not going to do it because it's just not fun anymore. It's too stressful. The timing, we want to focus on our projects at work. It's just, it's a good place to end it. And it's like, that's just, it is what it is. And it was an interesting post-mortem of just like talking about their process, going through it, starting it up and kind of shutting it down. But again, this is not,
Yeah. I mean,
it's different, right? A different thing.
It's pretty relevant though. I mean, like, I guess I would comment that like sometimes you have an idea for a project and like it's a pretty good idea, you know, and then you put in the time to get it to work, and then, you know, it's a moderate success, and then at that point you're like, oh, what do I do from here? And I guess in their case, you know, they probably had some artistic vision, they fulfilled it,
Yep, yep.
people liked it, but in the end, it wasn't enough to continue
Yeah,
on
like
full
quit
time.
their job and like doing it full time, like they make billions of dollars on YouTube. Yeah, I mean, I just
Exactly.
sent the link on the videos. You can watch it later. You can look at it later. That's right. Yeah, I think they made videos that they were proud of. It seemed, and each one took a ton of time, and they learned a lot in the process because they learned a lot making these film analysis videos, and it resonated with an audience. But then after a while, it's like it's the same kind of videos they were making, and they're like, just not feeling it anymore.
Yeah, I guess I think a lot of people, or there's a decent amount of people where they've never had the opportunity to exercise some part of them, and then they do it, and it's a fulfilling thing and so on. Um, and I think, at least in my experience, like once you do it, your your taste changes. So like you don't you're looking for a bigger high, I would say. And so you can have an idea that has merit, but then you still pass it up because you're like, okay, it's pretty cool, but like full-time devotion is a pretty big price. And so,
Yeah.
like the first time is cool because you're expressing yourself for the first time. But like once you've gotten that out of your system, then I think you start to be more selective about where you focus your energy.
Yeah, and also just, I mean, thinking about the long game too, of like, qualitatively, is that the only thing you want to be doing and grinding it out? And then it feels like a grind. You're just maintaining, making more of the same videos or whatever. And then, part of this post-mortem, they talk about like, they've always wanted to have an artistic vision, but then as they grow an audience, you have all these readers chiming in or commenters saying, oh, you should make a video about this, or I like this. And they're like, we just did this because we were interested. We're not going to like take random requests from YouTube commenters. Or it's like, whatever. And then people will like yell at you if you like do something they don't like. Right? It's like, we don't really need this.
I mean, like a related thing with the PhD, like, is I think it was just this urge to express myself, and like, from a research standpoint, they're not super good, right? Like you'd almost laugh at some of them. But I think, the taste at the time was really influenced by, there's this urge that I want, like, I've never built something like this. I want to build it. And then once you get that out of your system, then at least in my case, like the taste starts to become, you start to itch not to do the self-expression, but to make a research contribution. I think in my case, like it took those initial projects where, you get something out there, then you're like, kind of good, but like I'm ready to do something. I'm ready to do something bigger. Did you go through that, Phil? Like,
Yeah, I mean, the thought I had wasn't the PhD. It was actually with the Python tutor. Like, it was mostly post PhD, right? And well, not take up too much time on this, but like, I remember like one of the things was wanting to do some kind of a full time gig where I could do the Python tutor thing for a lot of the time, right? I mean, I started off at Google, and then when that kind of changed around, I was looking at other jobs. I remember this really distinctly because um, as I was looking for jobs or thinking about what to do with it, one of my friends from IT, he was like, it was very similar to what we're talking about now, and also this every frame of painting post-mortem. He was like, you have this thing, it's tight and stuff, and like people can visualize their code and it's tight. And like, do you have a bigger vision for this? Or is it just, we're just going to make this thing, it's really awesome, we're going to add languages, we're just going to like have these tight visualizations. And he said, yeah, obviously it's useful, people are using it. This was like 5 years ago. But he was like, do you want to be doing this day in and day out, grinding on this thing, right? Like, whereas there's a whole universe of possibilities and stuff. I mean, I don't know what words he phrased it, but that was my interpretation. And and then I thought about that for a bit, and I was like, it appealed to me a lot at that time, right? Because it was very much that spirit of, this is something I made that was the first thing that really took off, and it really resonates with people. And then there's all this low hanging fruit stuff to do, right? You can do X and Y and Z, and you can get more users, and you can do whatever. But then there was not a bigger picture shell around it beyond like, this is just really gives me a lot of flow right now. But it's like, would it give me flow for 5 years doing this or 10 years doing
Yeah,
this?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so I definitely thought about this a fair amount, and I felt pretty happy with the balance I've struck so far, because thinking about crafting a larger career where this still stays a significant part of the career, but there's a kind of larger umbrella of a lot of things.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I would imagine that, you get this super high from a lot of people using your tool, and then you start to zoom out and then you say, okay, but then what? Like where do this is awesome and a lot of flow, but like let me zoom out and think about my career too. Like
Yeah, yeah, and I didn't really think about the commercialization route as much, but I think that if I had thought about the commercialization route, it would have it would have hit I think we would have hit a lot of the same challenges, I think, in a very parallel world. And I think one thing, I mean, again, this is not within scope what I want to do now, but like, I think actually the coder pad thing is really relevant, right? So like turning this into a preparation for programming interviews. So with this visualizations, and we can add quizzes and we can activities and this tutoring and this real-time interface, you can imagine pitching this as an interview prep tool for people preparing for programming interviews and now for these data science interviews. So I could totally imagine getting into that, but then it's a matter of, you got to out hustle all these other kinds of tools that are doing this. And then you got to think about all the business stuff. And there's just a lot of other stuff around it that I was like, yeah, I'm not really, I never really felt like going down the entrepreneurial route. So I could see all these possible futures, but even though it looks promising, I'm like, yeah, I'm not really feeling grinding out all that part just personally.
yeah, yeah. I think it's good you had the foresight to, look ahead and say, it's not for me, because you could half do it too. You could be like, oh, it seems like there's this opportunity there, then kind of go through the motions, but like,
Yeah, no, I wouldn't have to. Yeah, I'm just like, this is just too, yeah, this is way too much. Yeah, it's a kind of a very parallel path, but yeah, I mean, I'm happy with the route I took so far with how it was navigated. Because I mean, the other thing here is, just personally speaking, it's like, the amount of usage that I've gotten with it and the amount of traction and stuff, it looks like really, really impressive when you're in academia, right? Because like very few people can have those numbers and have those things. So like it sets me up really well for, say, research grants or papers or just publicity within academia. But then if it's like, if I'm going into the startup or the entrepreneurial world, these numbers are not big at all. And then like people really don't care about these things as much at my scale. So like I felt like I kind of knocked it myself into an easy mode by being in academia with this project and pitching it, rather than being in trying to be coder pad or whatever.
yeah, yeah, that's a good point. Because like, when I talk with friends, it's like, oh, we get a couple million uniques a month. Like, whoa. Then you talk to other people, it's like, all right, and then how do you get it bigger? It's like, yeah, different scales, and yeah,
Exactly. Yeah. I
yeah.
mean, because whereas, the average projects in academia, like no one uses outside your lab, right? So like if that's the bar to beat, it's not as hard, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I was feeling that, but yeah, I mean, people ask me a lot. I mean, this is an interesting, relevant conversation, because over the years, people have totally asked me about why I'm not thinking about commercializing, or whenever I give talks on this Python doing, they're like, yeah, this seems like you can totally have commercial. I mean, I could have at least had the Robert 2013 Google AdWords opportunities, that level, of just like putting simple ads on there and doing stuff. And I remember you actually convinced me to try it one summer. I remember this. I put it on for one summer, and it actually like made, again, I had the same experience. Like, well, this is more money than I expected. And I'm like, I'm not really feeling this, because it's not like that much money. And it was like a few $100, for a few weeks or whatever. I'm like, like, not really feeling. I like keeping it fairly clean for now. So
Yeah,
I
yeah.
took it off after like a month. But I'm like, yeah, again, it's like it wasn't big enough to be life changing. I mean, it was life changing. I'm like, okay, all right, maybe I'll rethink it.
So if you added a zero, maybe you'd keep it on, or
Yeah, I mean, I probably, yeah. I mean, yeah, I think so. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. The
I
money
remember
corrupts.
I did not push too hard for it. I think a part of you wanted to try it. Like I
Yeah, that's right. I think it was me, wanting to do it and, needing an excuse to rationalize it over when that was summer. That was 2015. So that was when you were experimenting with the
Yeah,
ads.
yeah, yeah.
That was
That's
2015. I
right.
remember this. You just corrupted everybody, you know. But I actually know the ad thing was interesting because I actually co-opted that idea for so what I end up doing with the banner space on top is I actually end up advertising research studies right on it, which is relevant research studies, either the ones I'm doing or my students are doing, or ones that colleagues are doing. And it turned out that's a great source of learners who are just wanting to try interesting tutorials or interesting things. So that kind of experience, I'm like, all right, maybe the putting Google Ads on there wasn't the best thing, in terms of what I want to do for my career, but actually thinking about the fact that, people will actually click on banners you put up. You can put up these relevant research studies and route people to things, and we get participants that way. So that's like, that was actually a big win for me.
Cool, man. I contributed. That's pretty
Yeah,
cool.
exactly. Exactly. You should get acknowledged for this. Just these ideas. And I think about this still, I mean, a fair amount of well, not that much, but just thinking about like, it's interesting. I guess we'll conclude in the next few minutes with this, is that like I just know that every month this Python tutor site goes by, I'm just leaving stuff on the table, right? So maybe you can think about this too, because I just know that there's stuff I can do to amp it up and like make it better and whatever, and I'm just leaving things on the table. But that's not my where I choose to spend my time. I just wanted to make sure that it's steady and it's doing okay and it's keeping updated and it's running. But I definitely think there's a lot more in the table that I could get with it, but it's just not the right time, right, for me. Hopefully in a few years, maybe the timing will be better. There's a ton of stuff I'd want to do to think about it, but it's just career wise for me at this point, it's not the right time to prioritize. And the goal is just to keep everything flowing.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's good. You make a conscious decision because, like, you know, you could have the mentality of, oh, I want to squeeze everything I can out of this project, but like opportunity cost, right? You got to
Yeah.
consider what else you can do.
Oh, totally. I mean, especially on my career path now. I mean, that would not be a good use of my time. And I made videos about this and things of striking that balance between, maintaining stuff and making sure things are running smoothly. Because, what I don't want is for some reason for it to not show up on Google searches at all, and then the traffic drops to like nearly zero. I'm like, wait a minute, what just happened? Right? I just don't want something to fall off the rails. Basically, I just want to keep it going well enough that it just keeps on collecting data and coming in. Nothing just or the site just goes down for like a week and it just gets off Google because the site was down. Right? Like I just want to make sure nothing is off the rails bad.
For the longest time, that was my biggest fear. Is like, oh, the site goes down and then I vanish from the rankings and then I'm dead. Right now, I'm okay with it. Like if that happens, then like I don't know. I mean, obviously it'd be terrible, but like I could live with that now, whereas before it was like my worst nightmare.
So you felt like you got that, at least for the personal creative expression part, you got that all out and you were, satisfied with that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, I think having gone through it, you seek new challenges now, I would say.
Yeah, I'm feeling that. Yeah, I mean, I'm feeling the Python tutor thing for the long game as well, and not in terms of like making money or whatever, but just like feeling that there's still, it's like still, years later, there's nothing really like it that exists, and that there's obviously a captive audience, and there's gonna be more and more people using it, and there's multiple languages on it, so for some reason, no one wants to learn Python anymore. We have a framework, so we can just put other languages on it. I mean, we already have a lot of languages, but there was a whole marketing issue there of things. But again, if JavaScript is going to be the thing, I would just recall it. Everything will be JavaScript based, or whatever.
Is JavaScript tutor still available?
Oh, like the actual domain name? Yeah. So I don't think I registered all the other domain names or tried even. But I did do your suggestion of just having a landing page that's called that, and that's actually reasonable. It shows up on Google. If you search other languages and tutor, it shows up reasonably well. So just a landing page on the page, but yeah, there is definitely, the next level is just getting those domains, I guess. But I haven't really rigorously looked into that.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, again, these are things that are like, stuff you went through 5 years ago, but I was just like, this is just not on my radar at this point, because it's, nothing is going to collapse if this doesn't happen. But I am leaving things on the table, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Um, But I guess the other thing, I have the freedom that this is not my livelihood at this point, and that fact that like there's nothing else that's there for people to use. So it's like it's not like someone else made a JavaScript visualizer thing that's awesome, and then like, oh man, I just got totally scooped because I didn't put the right word in.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you're fortunate that someone hasn't come up with a profitable way to compete with you, because then you'd have motivated competitors. Whereas right now, like,
Yeah, there's no, yeah, exactly. And yeah, as I think it's fine. I mean, I think for its purposes, it's doing. I'm pretty happy with where the state is, and I would love to write up something about all this later on. When when there's a better inflection point. But all right, last words before we depart. Now we so much stuff that we cover. You unleashed your whole last 5, 6 years almost.
yeah, I
Another
mean,
PhD. I mean, it's basically a PhD length activity.
dang, yeah. I'm kind of every year that goes by, like, shoot, I wish I had gotten more done. But I mean, it's been pretty cool to work on it. And definitely, it's been a huge learning experience. And I'm just itching for something, the next challenge, right? And
Yeah, I
that's
mean, it seems like for n equals 1 or 2, that scale thing. That seems. I mean, what is your sense on like how the percentile that you've reached in terms of having just 1 or 2 very small number of people? It seems like you've reached a pretty high percentile. I mean, there's only a few high profile cases of really small shops making it huge, right? I mean, it seems like this sort of level is already pretty high up there.
yeah. I mean, if you look at it like a competition, yeah, I mean, it's pretty cool. I mean, the downside though is that it's very front heavy in terms of, like the big successes are like gigantic successes, then everyone else is kind of like medium to small, right? And so, like, it's like you got an A in the class, but you need an A plus plus to kind of hit it really big, and so you're just like, we did okay, So yeah,
That is still pretty impressive because, considering that most people who want to start something, especially at that scale, like there's not going to work out super well.
yeah. So I mean, overall, I would say I'm reasonably satisfied with how things have gone.
All right, that's a good note to end on. That's the conclusion for the day. All right, we'll chat more offline. All right, this is awesome. Good job telling your. This is like I think the very first episode you told bits and pieces of the story. This is like the most coherent narrative so far.
All right, dude.
This is gonna definitely get you, 2x the number of users because everyone's gonna watch the entirety of this video. All these kids who are 15 have the attention span to watch this entire video about, people twice their age talking about stuff that's totally boring to them.
All right, dude. See you, man.